Hello, Thaddeus. It's okay. I've got a plan. Okay. Admittedly not a very good plan. One more thing. I'll be right back. Okay, I think I got everything. Hillary Clinton's still president, right? Obama is? The dinosaurs are still extinct, though. Okay. Well, that's close enough then. Honestly, you take one little joyride on an asteroid and everyone's like, ah, dinosaurs are trying to eat me. Wah, wah, wah. Okay, so after watching your last video, I decided that I was going to go out and get the Candy Corn Oreos because I'd seen them at Walmart before, so I assumed Walmart would still have them, but they didn't. So then I went around to a couple of other stores to try to find those Candy Corn Oreos, and nobody had them. So we're still left in a lurch of whether or not they taste awful. I assume they do. I don't know if you do, but because I couldn't find them, instead I got a banana. Because bananas are good. I also got some Arizona iced tea because they're like 50 cents in the dollar aisle at Price Cutter, and I really can't go there without getting a bunch of them. However, seaweed Pringles were right out, though I did find some hot flavored ones, and I didn't buy them because they looked awful. So in my last video, I promised that I was going to do some book recommendations for you since I didn't get to them in the last video, so I have 3 books to recommend to you. First, and this might be cheating, it's W.D. Blackman's Blood and Milk. I know it's kind of cheating because I know you already own the book because I was there when it got autographed the second time. Now, the thing that I really enjoyed in this book is the dynamic between the young son and the grandpa. They have a very good kind of boys club going, but they still have the sort of recognition that they're not fully capable of taking care of themselves and require the help of the female lead. It's a novel in short stories, so if you're not into short stories, this might not be your sort of thing, but I highly recommend that you pick this book up if you're not either Thad and I and don't already own it. Now my next 2 books are crime novels that come from Melville House. You might remember them from AWP where I went to their panel. Also for these 2 books, there's not going to be an Amazon.com link to buy the books because I know how the proprietors of the press feel about Amazon.com. If you remember back in the day where there's that big hoopla about buy buttons on Amazon.com, Melville House was one of the first people that Amazon.com pulled the buy buttons from. The first book is Derek Raymond's He Died with His Eyes Open. In this book, it's set in London, and you have kind of your old school detective for kind of, let's say, a minor crimes case squad thing. Basically, he deals with crimes that nobody else wants to do because they're practically unsolvable. So in this book, the detective finds a bunch of cassette tapes that eventually help him figure out what the guy who was murdered was into and why he was killed. Now, the second book, Penguin Lost, is the second in a series of books. This one's set in kind of Russia, Ukraine-ish area. He actually is trying to find a missing penguin. You'd think that'd be kind of boring because it's a penguin. How much agency can a penguin have? But honestly, this is my favorite book out of all 3. So the last books I've actually finished, though, is the Hunger Games series because I wanted to help Hillary with her thesis, and I figured it would help to actually know what goes on in the books in order to do that. I should probably warn people that the next bit of this video is probably going to contain spoilers. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put up a sign to warn people to mute their sound. And then when I'm done talking about the Hunger Games, I'm going to put up another sign that says, hey, you should unmute the video and listen to me again. I'm done talking about the Hunger Games. There will be no more spoilers being talked about at this moment. So hopefully you can figure that out. It's not that hard. Just, don't screw it up. And if you do, it's not my fault. You couldn't figure out how to hit a mute button. So what bugged me about the Hunger Games, other than the fact that there's some serious craft errors, particularly in the first book, was that Katniss is pretty much superfluous to most of the broader plot line. I mean, you have the whole rebellion going on, but she's really unnecessary and doesn't really do much for it other than be a symbol. And if you really pay attention to the book, it's the rebels that continuously control her the entire time. So this got me thinking about what in this universe actually has the agency, the power, who controls what. And the thing I came up with is kind of thinking off of Baudrillard's Simulacrum, is that it's not the state that actually has the power, it's the spectacle. The Hunger Games is what has the power. You go back to Baudrillard's example of Disneyland. Disneyland is, in fact, a private enterprise. It's owned by Disney. So that particular idea of the Simulacrum is one that is controlled and shaped by the Disney Corporation. I mean, you think about the fantasies that we have based on the Disney princesses. These fantasies are constructed by a corporation to a particular end. They control the message. They have the power there to control what the Simulacrum is. In the Hunger Games, you have, well, the Hunger Games. They're the broad spectacle. They're the Simulacrum. They're there to remind people of what the first Civil War was like. And you notice that most of the rebels, the ones of any importance in the story, are congregated around those Hunger Games. It's the designer, Cinna, Haymitch, all the victors from before, the game maker himself, the one that eventually became the head game maker. all these people, they're structuring themselves around the spectacle because the spectacle is where the power is. If you kind of go back to Althusser, you get this idea of the ideological state apparatus, and that would be kind of the spectacle in a lot of ways, but in some ways it doesn't really fit too well. But the state apparatus is like the military. You look at the state forces, the military, the peacekeepers, they don't change before the Hunger Games and after the Hunger Games. They were still there beforehand, they were still there after. And so what you have is a power dynamic of actual physical power that didn't change. So we can't blame like a weakening of the police force or the state force to why the rebellion started happening. All you have is the idea that the power has shifted in who controls the spectacle. Since all the rebels have congregated around the Hunger Games, they've been able to turn Katniss into this symbol. That's why Cinna volunteered for District 12, because he had an idea of a costume that might help create a symbol that would move the districts to rebellion. And when you think about what's in the books, the districts were already kind of primed for rebellion. District 13 had their apparatus ready to go. What they were waiting for was the creation of this symbol, this figurehead. And so the gist of all of this is the idea that what we have is not a state power anymore in this situation. What you have is a spectacle that holds all the power, and whoever controls that spectacle controls the people. And clearly in the books we see the spectacle turned against the state, and then the rebellion follows with that. For me, I don't like stopping at just literary examples because I feel like if we're really going to talk about these sorts of things, we should be searching for broader, real-life examples in our cultural context. If we can't broaden it out to that, then what we have is just this hypothetical and no ability to take this theory and put it into praxis. So we look at kind of our political conventions nowadays. We just had the two-party conventions. And what we really have these days is a politics of the spectacle. And this is why I think Obama has a real advantage in this election, because he's very good at controlling the spectacle in ways that Mitt Romney and the Republicans are not. And I think this is where the liberals have kind of an advantage because they have a lot of comedians like Jon Stewart on their side. And the thing about being a comedian is you are a spectacle in a way. And so part of your job is learning how to manipulate a spectacle. And as I've also seen from Obama is he does have an ability to kind of form some of the spectacle around him to kind of control it in a little bit. He has kind of a similar snarky attitude, a very toned down version of what Jon Stewart does on The Daily Show. And I think that's what gives him the real advantage in this election, is because it's no longer about, say, who has the best ideas, but who can control the spectacle the best. And those were just some ideas I had at like 2 in the morning last night, because that's when I do my best thinking, when I'm trying to go to sleep. I'd also like to give a birthday shout out to Shiloh and Jessica. Happy birthday to you, and congratulations to the Earth for once more taking you around the sun. It did a lot of work, and I think it needs to be congratulated more often than people do, but I hope your birthdays were happy nonetheless. I will see you in the future.